Okay, hello. All right, I think I finally figured this out. So I do a lot of webinars all over the world and stream a lot of my workshops and stuff, but I've never used the YouTube because I just had GoToMeeting and Zoom and some of those kinds of things. So anyway, this was new and I thought I could pause it, and instead I ended and deleted the whole thing. So anyway, we'll get started now. I may continue to use this platform or use a different one, I'm not sure. But like I had said in the information that I put on here about the Life Hack Bootcamp, is that this is something I was going to get started on in the summer, but really decided to do now just because I kind of see more of a need for people who just in general could use some life hack skills. And the reason that we decided to name it that is just a little bit about my background. I am certified as a behavior analyst, and I work a lot with kids in the school setting, both with autism, but also kids that have a lot of mental health needs. And really everyone in the world has some type of mental health need. And that's sort of part of what we're trying to help. Because, for example, one of the trainings that I went to, someone was asking well, what causes someone to have anxiety? And the presenter was like, well, no, everybody in the world has anxiety. That's just part of being human. Anybody that goes to a party and you don't know anybody, you're probably going to have some anxiety. It's a new situation where you don't really know anybody, and that anxiety is going to be up a little bit. And then let's say you say something funny and you make the group laugh, then all of a sudden you're feeling like you fit in a little bit and the anxiety is going to go down. So everybody has it up and down, different types of things. And those various areas of anxiety are normal. It's when it keeps you from meeting goals or leaving your house or those kinds of things. And what I realized is that a lot of people, probably with what's going on, being stuck at home, have perhaps lost a lot of the coping skills that allow them to get through life, because we all have different ways of, coping through the things that happen, and that life is hard. And so this will actually be sort of an ongoing thing that will be new with my YouTube channel. I'll do some of them live and some of them recorded, but just again, as some background with working with kids with autism, I've also started working with a lot of kids that had sort of various mental health needs, and we'll share a lot of information when I do some of these in my own mental health needs. I've also struggled a lot with anxiety, and even went through a period of some pretty significant depression. I think 12 years ago, some panic attack kind of stuff, and just different sort of things. And really, when I went through the training and learning about this kind of stuff, it's based on something called acceptance and commitment training. I went through a training that was 4 days long, 10 hours for each day. So basically packed in 40 hours, and everything that I thought I knew about working with kids and understanding behavioral science, and it just blew me away, and it changed my life forever. And has given me a lot of the tools and skills, and specifically a particular individual that I won't name specifically how I know this person, but I do have family members that have struggled with mental health as well. And so sort of showing how that basically changed his life, because what I do know is that a lot of people have difficulty with something that I will be referring to and sort of teaching you, called psychological flexibility. And when people have low levels of psychological flexibility, or they score low on those kinds of things, things that we typically teach people called that are very traditional, like what's called cognitive behavior therapy, where basically we're teaching you that if you have a negative thought, you should replace that with something more positive, more joyful. Think of things that make you happy and those kinds of things. And this is not for everyone in the world, but for people who already have low levels of what we call this psychological flexibility, suggesting things like changing your thoughts or replacing your thoughts can actually be toxic. So in this first little session, I'm basically just going to kind of tell you a couple stories of how this changed my life and how it changed this other person's life. simply for the fact of wanting to give you a little bit of buy-in on why you would even want to learn more about this or do any of the things that might be beneficial. And so, again, the one particular kiddo telling you about was an individual that, again, is close to me in some way, but I want to keep his privacy because he did end up having some pretty significant mental health needs. But, there were different kinds of things that happened as he grew up and working with the family, some explosive behavior now and then, some difficulties in school, a lot of anxiety, not wanting to go to school, some hospitalizations. There were some mental health diagnoses of an anxiety disorder, obsessive compulsive. I think bipolar was a diagnosis at one point. This individual had several times where he felt suicidal and that he felt like he just, never fit in. He didn't have friends and sort of had a lot of these thought patterns of I'm not good enough and I can't ever do anything right and those kinds of things. And my experience had always been, well, those negative thoughts should be replaced by positive thoughts. You think I'm not good enough. You replace that with what is the evidence? Well, I am good enough. And what happens is that sometimes for some people, again, that don't have good psychological flexibility, that actually does not work. So I'm going to do a little test that I do sometimes with people where I share with them. And I have a little thing here that I was going to show if I can find it. I can put it in here. So here's your little test that I'm going to give you, which is this. Let me see if I can get it on here right. Oh gosh, and now it's going to be backwards. Never mind. Okay, so I'm going to do it differently. Basically, it says, don't look at this chicken. And everybody cannot not look at it because when the rule tells you not to, we tend to do things we're not supposed to do. And then when you actually look at the chicken, it says game over. Because when you tell somebody, for example, and this is something that I do in some of my training, do not think about a purple dinosaur. Well, first of all, I want you to think about Barney. Think about the purple dinosaur that we all saw in the videos, Barney, and sort of picture him and him jumping around and laughing and singing the silly songs that he did to preschool kids. And you sort of have that in your mind of what you think of as a purple dinosaur. And then if I just asked for 10 seconds to not think about a purple dinosaur, and I won't even go the whole 10 seconds. It'll seem like a very long, awkward period of time, okay? So for like 5 seconds, do not think about whatever you do. Do not think about a purple dinosaur. Okay, ready, go. Again, I only went 5 seconds, and yet I guarantee you everyone probably either thought about it or you had to try really hard. The thought comes into your head and you're like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I can't, I'm not supposed to be thinking about it. So let me sort of frame this and how this may be problematic for some people who have things like anxiety, for example. So let's say I have anxiety and I'm going to share a lot of stories about myself because sometimes I think that's a good way of learning and in how this kind of stuff helped me and other people that I know. In addition to some family members dealing with anxiety and some of those kinds of things, my daughter also lost her best friend when she was 16 to suicide. And so there's a lot of reasons why helping people with various mental health needs, which is really silly to say that some people have it and some people don't, because we all do. It's just a matter of how it affects our lives and how it allows us to meet values and those kinds of things. My biggest thing is helping people become the extraordinary human that they are meant to be. And I've learned a lot of ways to do that in that kind of thing. But again, let's say, I had this individual and we're going to say his name is Jonathan. And he struggled in school because he had a little bit of a learning disability. He had a brain bleed at birth that caused some of this disability. And so he wasn't the smartest in the class and struggled with the fact that his grades were never perfect, but he worked really hard. He sometimes had some trouble with social skills, so he didn't always fit in socially with everyone. And he had a lot of areas of feeling not good enough. And I'm not as smart as everybody. I don't play sports as well. I don't have enough friends. I don't have a girlfriend. And a lot of those kinds of things sort of plagued him on a day-to-day basis with this anxiety that would also sometimes in kids and adults comes out as irritability and frustration and some of those kinds of things. And again, my background in education and also working with this family, because it was somebody that I know personally as well, was, the whole traditional, if you have these negative thoughts, you're supposed to replace them with positive thoughts. So let's think about the evidence. You do have some friends, or you did get a particular grade. And so again, when you're doing those things and you're telling someone to not think the thought and replace it with a positive thought, I just shared with you how asking you not to think about a purple dinosaur makes you actually think about the purple dinosaur. So what happens is a person who, again, may have various difficulties with psychological flexibility, and I'll get into that over time. You'll understand what that means, is that if I already think that I'm not good enough and I'm having this thought that I'm not good enough, or I'm stressed about something, and it's causing my brain to sort of go over that or really overly focus on it. And because of it, it sometimes causes people to want to like just avoid things. We procrastinate, we watch TV instead, we don't meet our goals. And so let's say that the idea is that I'm supposed to not think about it. So that's my strategy. And then guess what? That thought keeps coming back. So someone who is already feeling depressed and anxious and having some difficulty is told that they're supposed to replace that thought, and our brains are not actually able to do that. So when the thought comes back, what happens? The person says, well, crap, I can't even do the one strategy I'm supposed to do, right? So it can actually lower cause the depression and anxiety and all those things to become worse. So again, I'm going to share a story about how for some individuals, it can actually be toxic. And it was for this particular individual, and just sort of give you some ideas of how this changed his life and mine and some others, and sort of, what the whole purpose of this life hack boot camp is, kind of thing. So at any rate, this particular person that, again, I was familiar with, he was in his early 20s, and his family was trying to get him to sort of be ready to live on his own because, again, he did have some learning disabilities. So he was sort of learning some various things, and he lived with a roommate, and he was at his parents' house, and his parents were saying, okay, come on, you need to go on home here because we're kind of winding down for the night. And the mother had told the daughter, his sister, hey, don't start watching your Netflix show until your brother leaves, because if you turn it on, he's going to want to start watching it. And I want to make sure he gets home and gets himself settled. So the sister says to Jonathan, is the name I'm using, would you just hurry up and get out of here? Because in her frame, she wanted to start watching Netflix. So his mom is saying, come on, you need to get going. I want to make sure you get a good night's sleep. You've got work tomorrow. And the sister is saying, would you just get out of here? So he gets in his car to go to his apartment. And his dad was actually following him because he needed to get something there as well. And Jonathan, who again, he's in his 20s, his whole life had been taught by his parents, me and in my role, teachers, therapists, counselors. He had struggled with mental health issues his entire life and was told when you have those negative thoughts, because he's now driving back to his apartment and these thoughts are overwhelming him. And he told me this very specifically. He's like, I just kept saying, nobody wants me. Nobody wants me at home. Nobody wants me. My own sister doesn't want me. He didn't feel wanted. And that's not what his sister meant. His sister wanted to watch TV, but he felt unwanted. And he said, I kept trying to replace the thoughts with things about vacation and all this stuff that everybody's constantly telling me to do. And finally, again, he's 20, he's driving, and he's like, I am so tired of my brain telling me these negative things and this inability to stop these negative thoughts because I try to replace them like everybody tells me to, and they just keep coming. And so he basically took his seatbelt off and flipped his car and rolled it down a hill in an attempt to kill himself. And it was his second attempt. I realize that these things are sometimes difficult to talk about, but it's very clearly an example where with someone who is already struggling with significant anxiety, a strategy like that we know can be toxic. And I know personally someone that it was toxic for, in that it caused a suicide attempt. He was completely fine. In fact, when his dad got there, the car was upside down, and he was sitting in what would have been the roof of the car, and basically was like this, it didn't work. Nothing ever works. Like he was actually mad that his attempt didn't work. But the whole part of this strategy being difficult for some people. I don't want anybody to think like I'm throwing cognitive behavior therapy under the bus, because there's a lot of research that shows that it works very well. I happen to score fairly high on psychological flexibility now that I've learned all these skills. I didn't at first. But now that I do, I can have a negative thought where I look in the mirror and say, "Ooh, I don't look good." And then I'm like, "Yeah, I do. It's fine." Right? Like that doesn't consume my thoughts. And so for me, that could be something that could be successful. But for some people, with it being toxic, we have to be aware of that, because we now know that there are other things that can be done, which is through this whole thing that's based in something called acceptance and commitment training. And again, it completely changed my life. I had no idea that this skill-based kind of program was even out there. But I want to share just a couple of things with like sort of why some of those things happen. And my goal here is to try to keep these at like 30 minutes, but literally to teach you everything that you need to know with this, it will take month out a year probably to learn it all. It took me a long time to learn it all. And I will do some videos that are more technical, because for me, my brain likes to understand why it works. And some of it will be more like, here's a strategy that helps you when you're about to go into a party and you're having a lot of anxiety and you feel like you're not really sure you want to go in there. Or are you having difficulty with how challenging it is to be at home and you don't have your typical coping skills of music or those kinds of things? Like, how do we persist through that? I want to teach you all of the skills that I've learned, because some of the times that I had anxiety, I felt so out of control. I had no way of I couldn't make it stop. And now I actually have some tools. And that's why I called it the life hack. Where was hold on, I want to look at my definition really quick, because I looked up. So life hack, the actual definition of life hack, is any trick, shortcut, skill, or novelty method that increases productivity and efficiency in all walks of life. So that's why I have lots of different ways to sort of teach it, but it's just to sort of give people skills. So let me give you an example now of how I helped this young man who had been really through lots of different things in school and was working through, various ways of being successful by learning all the academics that he needed to and job skills. But what was still really bothering him was his negative thoughts and how that anxiety tended to keep him from wanting to do things. And really, anytime that got really bad, I will use words like experiential avoidance, because when anxiety is really bothering us, most of us want to avoid. And it's a very typical sort of reaction. So anyway, I spoke with him after this happened. He was hospitalized. The family adjusted medication, sort of worked through some things. And by the way, he's doing fantastic now because of learning these things. It was sort of the last piece that really made the difference. And I certainly didn't know, because I was part of teaching him from the time he was very young on how to try to handle all of this stuff in what was the wrong way. I just didn't know it at the time. But some of what what we know when using some of these kinds of things is really understanding that our brains are very tied to language. So what do I mean by that? Like, the things that we say to other people when we're talking are also the same kinds of things that we might say to ourselves in our minds. And there's different things. And again, I'll get into this, like that we follow different rules, or there's another concept that we know that we can apply called delayed discounting. Well, what does that mean? It means that humans like smaller sooner over larger later rewards. So yeah, my larger later reward is that I would be very healthy if I ate right and exercised. The smaller sooner is the cookie looks really good right now. And so sometimes we do things based on sort of all of these combined things, and the language part sometimes really messes with us, because we're talking to ourselves in our mind and we say things. And I hope that, I'm a professional. I just finished my PhD. I present to schools all over the world. I've been to China and Canada and help other teachers. But in this format, I hope that I can be somewhat informal in saying that the way I would describe my brain is that sometimes it's an asshole. Like, it won't shut up about me, going on and on about what I should have done and shouldn't have done. And how does that not consume you at times? So one of the things that happened with this young man after, he had this second suicide attempt based on what he felt was like just this frustration that he couldn't control the anxiety and the thoughts and those kinds of things, was he had another situation. And I was there where he was basically, having some anxiety. I don't remember what it was. It was sort of, I can't remember the situation, but when it came up, instead of doing typically, and what we would do is, don't think about it, be joyful, think of everything you should be happy for, blah, blah, blah. Instead, I said, you know what? I was wrong. I thought that when you had those negative thoughts, the best way was to try to replace them with positive thoughts. But for some people, not everybody, for some people, that doesn't really work. And because it keeps coming back up. So we teach a lot of this through metaphors, which I'll do the same thing in this format because they're very powerful in how you can apply them to real life. So I was sitting with Jonathan and I said, okay, remember that time that you were driving back and you felt like no one wanted you? Or maybe sometimes you feel like you don't have enough friends or that you don't feel good enough. Like if I had to frame the thoughts that probably surround a lot of what goes on in my mind, even though I just said, yes, I have a PhD, it's that I'm not good enough. Everybody has those kinds of things, right? And so I said, okay, I want you to think about being in a swimming pool. And all of what we do really is guided by what we will talk about with being values, which is like, what's important to you? What is the path that you want to become this extraordinary human someday or tomorrow or in this very moment? That's everybody's goal, is to make a difference in life, right? And change the world in some way, even if it's just with one other individual. And I said, let's say you're in this pool and you have this goal that your value is that you want to become a phenomenal swimmer. Like that's always been a dream of yours, to meet this goal, to become a great swimmer. And maybe you even want to become so good that you beat some of Michael Phelps, records on swimming. And so in order to do that, you have to work hard and you have to practice and you have to do these things to become this great swimmer. Okay. So you're standing in the pool. And I want you to think about the fact that you're holding on to a beach ball. And instead of having those thoughts in your head that, no, I can't do this, I'm not good enough, that's a lot of work, I could never be as good as him, whatever those things are, I want you to think about putting them like on the beach ball, right? So you're holding on to this ball and you're holding on to it really tight because these thoughts are kind of really like, in your head about I'm not good enough, I don't know. And so what do we typically say? Well, don't worry about the thoughts, push them away. So I want you to take the beach ball and push it under the water so it's out of the way because you need to be practicing swimming right now. What's going to happen with the ball? It's going to keep coming back up. And guess what? All you're doing is fighting with it. Push it under, comes back up, push it under, comes back up. That's some of what we do with life. We're fighting it, we're pushing it, we're saying it's not okay, I don't want this, it's interfering with things. What if that's just part of our brains because that's how we learned language? And again, for those of you that it matters, I'm going to do some of these that teaches you what it means by learning arbitrary relations in language, because it kind of makes sense why some of this happens with our brains. But what if those thoughts really aren't ever going to go anywhere? And pushing and fighting, all that does is put all your energy and focus on that. What if, Jonathan, you kept those thoughts of feeling not good enough on the beach ball and you just kind of let it float right over there? Like you accept it, it's part of it. It's not going anywhere. And you're just going to kind of let it float there. Might be a little uncomfortable, but at least you're not holding on to it, because if you're not holding on to it and you're not fighting it, making it go away and pushing it away and all those things, guess what? Your hands are free. And what does that mean? Now you can practice becoming a better swimmer, because before, the fight keeps you from doing that. So part of it has a lot to do with being able to learn how to accept what's hard. And I have noticed, even through the training that I've been to and with other people tend to push away or think that experiencing things that are hard and difficult are not okay, and that we should avoid them and push away, when sometimes pushing into it and feeling it and experiencing it isn't the end of the world. And so could you just have the ball kind of floating over there, because now you can become a better swimmer? And it was the first metaphor, and although it sounds very small, it was the first time, I think, for him that he was like, oh, so that thought doesn't control me. You don't have to say I'm having I am not good enough. You can start framing it as I'm having the thought that I'm not good enough, and it moves it away a little bit. And if I'm fighting with that all the time, I'm not working towards meeting what's valuable to me. And what's valuable to me might be different than what's valuable to somebody else, but we all want to be on a path to meet values to become this extraordinary human. And so when I taught him that, and he was like, so I don't have to make these thoughts go away, I don't have to push them away, they just come, yes, and you can just sort of accept them. They might even be uncomfortable. And so things that I've seen, kids and adults, I should say, but what I see a lot in our like high school, middle school age, is this like, I want instant gratification. I want the cookie now and not get the larger later reward that would be for maybe eating healthier. I want it right now. And I want hard things to go away. And so like if the math is hard and I'm like, I don't want to do it, they might miss out on something that's a better grade, that's going to get them a better score on their ACT and a better college opportunities and job opportunities. But we don't see that. We see this sort of instant gratification. So that's one of the metaphors. But then I want to tell you the next one that happened, because he was already like, wow, I don't have to fight these thoughts anymore. Yes, they're okay, but they're not who you are. Having the thought doesn't mean that's who you are. We do another one sometimes with kids and adults. I want you to have the thought, and all of you can do this right now. I want you to have the thought in your head, do not wiggle your fingers. And I want you to think it over and over and over and wiggle your fingers at the same time. So I can wiggle my fingers and I can say, do not wiggle my fingers. Do not wiggle your fingers. Do not wiggle your fingers. Oh, so the language in my head doesn't have to be what I do or don't do. It could just be the noise. I could separate a little bit and put it on that beach ball and accept to persist through what's hard. So let me give you the last example of how this really started to shift his life from, I can't do this anymore and I'm going to roll my car and be done with life, versus where he is now, which is enrolled in college and some pretty cool things. So the other one is he got a job as a server at a restaurant, and he overheard what he thought one of the other workers say something like, "You don't belong here." He would sometimes hear those kinds of things at school, or think, and maybe someone said it and maybe they didn't. Most of the time I would say, "Oh, you probably heard it wrong. Don't worry about it." We say that kind of stuff. Don't worry about it. That's not true. We all love you, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? People do worry about it, because that's hurtful to have somebody think that maybe you're not welcome. And so I took a different approach when working with his family. And I said, normally I would say, "You probably heard it wrong. Don't worry about it." I'm like, you know what? Someone could have said that. People are assholes. Somebody might not like you. But guess what? You now want to quit this job, right? Experiential avoidance. Ooh, that's uncomfortable. Someone might not like me. But will that help you persist to get to a goal? Because your value is that you want to hold a job, because holding a job you think is what's going to be important to be able to have a girlfriend someday. Remember, he's in his 20s, right? So I said, okay, then let's go back to our scenario of learning to become a better swimmer. And I did this with him. I said, okay, I'm going to time it, and I want to see how long you can hold your breath. And he held his breath for what I'm going to say 30 seconds. It's probably a little bit longer than that. And then I asked, why did you quit? Well, because it got uncomfortable. I said, okay, well, what if I told you that in order to be that good swimmer where you want to meet the goal to beat records someday, that you might also have to learn how to hold your breath a little bit longer. So this time I want you to hold your breath, and we're going to go to 33 seconds. So those last couple of seconds are probably going to be a little bit uncomfortable. But if I told you that doing so was going to be helpful in order to meet your goal to become a better swimmer, could you? Might be uncomfortable, but could you persist through that and do it? And he's like, yeah, probably. So then I had him hold his breath. And when he gets to 30, I'm like, okay, come on, you can do it 3 more times. I'm like, see, so what you probably have to do if you want to meet a goal is keep your job and go to work, and maybe avoid that person if it's uncomfortable. But quitting is too much avoidance to meet that goal. You have to persist through what's hard. And guess what? Not everybody in the world's going to like you. And you have to start learning that a really good thing to remember is what other people think of you is none of your business, because it really doesn't matter. And starting to teach him things like that, along with other people that I've worked with and myself. I know I promised 30 minutes, but I want to give one last example of myself that kind of put some of these things together, because what I realized, again, with my own anxiety and those kinds of things, but just to kind of show you how we do things that don't really make a lot of sense, but they're the things that we do. I had gestational diabetes with both pregnancies. And so I am at high risk of getting gestational diabetes as an adult. So I've seen, let's see, my middle son he's 21. So like basically for 21 years, I go yearly to an endocrinologist who checks my blood sugar. And he tells me the same thing every time. It's fine. You've got your borderline numbers, but you're good in order to keep you from ever having diabetes. Exercise every day, weight resistant kind of stuff, and very few carbs and sugar, right? Sounds good. Okay, that makes sense. And what would the larger later problem be of me getting gestational diabetes? It's a challenging disease. If you don't take care of it, you can lose a limb, you can lose eyesight and heart problems. And I don't want to have diabetes as an adult. But the idea of never having cookies and ice cream again, that seems like not a lot of fun, because again, I want the smaller, sooner reward of the cookie, because the larger, later reward is kind of far away. And so it's called, we discount it. We say, don't worry about it. But this is just kind of shows you what human behavior will sometimes do based on all of these things. So because of the fact that for me, I could probably make a statement that carrots and broccoli and vegetables and fruit and all those kinds of things fall in the category of good food, and ice cream and cookies fall into the category of bad food. And if I want to stay healthy, I should eat more good food and less bad food. Okay. So I know that those are healthy things that I should do, but because of the fact that I like smaller, sooner over larger later, I might decide that, okay, I'm going to start that tomorrow. Now, if I start that tomorrow, it means tomorrow I'm going to be good and I'm going to eat fruits and vegetables, and cookies and ice cream should probably go away forever because they're bad. And so if I'm not going to start till tomorrow, then today what I'm going to do is I'm going to eat all of the cookies and ice cream I can possibly get in, right? And so what happens is I overeat cookies and ice cream to the point that my stomach hurts and I feel sick. Why would someone do that? Why would you look at what we would call in the behavioral terms a contingency of doing something that would make you feel sick? And I saw this meme on Facebook. It was hilarious. It was like, I don't call it eating a whole box of Girl Scout cookies at one time. I call it supporting female entrepreneurs, right? It was sort of funny, but I'm like, I might have eaten a whole box of Girl Scout cookies before. But the idea that, well, that's hard to have to say no to things. But what if that meant meeting a goal or a value of some sort? And so it just wanted to give some examples, like when I realized, like, oh my gosh, like I do some of these things where that we have our own rules in our head about why we do things. If you look at just the simple contingency that smoking causes lung cancer, it should be easy for every person to quit smoking. But it's not, because we want smaller, sooner over larger later. We have rules and all these different things. And the fact that we now know that there are ways to give us skills, these life hacks, these shortcuts, methods that can help us meet our goals. Like I said, it completely changed my life in my ability to deal with things when sometimes my brain was being that asshole, or I was, not making the best choices that would help me meet values later. Or like I said, this particular young man who, for the first time ever, has now been able to persist through things that are hard and doesn't immediately go to experiential avoidance, because he now has some skills to accept what's hard. And it's why I put that in the tagline for the Life Hack Bootcamp. It's to be able to teach that fierce, determination and persistence to do what's hard when it matters to that person, and when doing so helps meet that goal. So I will be sharing either through my YouTube channel or my Facebook channel. There's a number of ways that we'll be doing this in terms of like sort of learning like how to do it. There's actually 6 areas of mindfulness and acceptance, something called self as context, and just lots of different things, and understanding all those things. I have tons of books. Some of them I'll go ahead and put something on my Facebook or the YouTube. I think there's a way that I'll be able to put but there's different books. Like this one's called The Happiness Trap. There's one called Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life. There's one called The Diet Trap. If food issues are difficult for you, Act Made Simple, the metaphors, different kinds of things. So I'm just going to be using different components and basically sort of teach you this repertoire, if you will, or this list of skills of how to deal with what's hard, because I put that in there in my tagline in there as well, is that pain is part of life, but suffering is optional. And that was very powerful for me. Dr. Stephen Hayes is the first person who sort of put together this information. I would highly recommend watching his TED Talk. It's about 23 minutes, but it talks about his level of panic attacks that got him to the point of creating this, that I feel like people don't even know is out there. And this has sort of been my goal, that as soon as I finished with my PhD, whether it was through YouTube or trainings, is to get this to the world. Because when I see someone like Jonathan, who wanted to hurt himself to the point of not being here anymore, and now has like this amazing outlook on life and has the skills to know how to handle when things are hard. It's something that I just feel like I'm compelled to try to bring to the world, because the joy that I see in him finally getting that last piece of seeing that I can do this, and I can meet goals and that kind of thing, with someone that struggled with it for so many years. It was really cool. He's off some of his medicine. It's really a pretty cool thing. So anyway, right now, my plan is to do this on Tuesdays and Fridays, but I'll always record it and it'll be on the YouTube channel. I think I marked this as unlisted, so I'll fix that. So you can share it with anybody. I'll title it in a way that if it's one of the ones that I'm doing to teach you why it works, because I'm helping you to understand how kids develop language and how all this happens. And it's more technical, because that's just, I like to understand the background, but not everybody does. Or if it's more learning a particular skill, I'll try to let people know that. But I'm really excited, and I hope that people share it, because again, people might look at me as someone that might say, oh, she's a pretty successful person. She's got a business. She works with kids. She helps people. And yet I sometimes get up and have the belief that I'm not good enough. And it affects me in ways that causes challenges at times. And so these skills help everyone become what, again, is sort of my goal, is to teach people to become that extraordinary human, whatever that is for you, so that you can meet the goals in life and the values that are important for you. And quite frankly, to persist through what's hard. And when I realized that and thought, man, we're all stuck here, and everyone's talking about on Facebook about how hard this is, and I don't have this, like, what if we had some skills to better tolerate what's hard, because it's important for what we need to do to all be healthy and be able to go back out again and meet those goals. So I just thought the timing was good, and wanted to go ahead and start sharing that. So please feel free to message me. You can message me privately on Facebook. I'll try to continue to communicate as best I can with the books that I would suggest that you might want to look at or purchase, or any other kind of resources, and that kind of thing. I have different things in PowerPoints and stuff like that, but they might all be good resources for people. But I hope you join me when you can, or watch the videos when you can. They won't be as long. Sorry, I had a lot to say. I do kind of talk a lot, but I'm more than happy for people to share this, because if I can save the life of someone who like my friend Jonathan thought was his only option, or even my daughter's friend who maybe could have had some better options, then that's going to be valuable for me, that I was able to help others. And that's sort of what it's kind of my personality, and that I want everybody to find the joy that I find most days, and have the skills on the days that it's difficult, because life is in the happiness trap, I think shit happens is one of the things that Russ Harris said, because that's life. So having ways to deal with it, I think are very valuable, and I want to help get that out to the world. So help me do that. I hope this was helpful for you to sort of at least have a little bit of an intro and get you some buy-in to want to learn more. I promise I'll make the videos shorter next time, so you don't have to commit to quite as much time. But thank you very much for being here, and certainly let me know if you have any questions, and I will be updating again with some of the resources, and we'll see you on Tuesday at 2:00. So again, Tuesdays and Fridays at 2, watch it live, or the video afterwards as well. So anyway, thanks a bunch for joining me, and thanks for your patience with me figuring out how to do this for the first time. So have a great night. Thanks.